Let's make sure everything's going all right. Gotta pull up my spreadsheet here. Okay, spreadsheet's pulled up. Looks like we're ready to go. Perfect. All right. So we're going to be talking about some of the upcoming free agents coming out of our league. We're about halfway through the entire season. So I think it's right about time we actually start talking who we can start expecting to see actually hit the market. Now, there's a couple guys who have not gotten extensions that are traded. I'm going to mention who they are. Uh, but I will say if they did get traded, because there is a more than likely probability if they're getting traded that they'll probably get an extension of some kind, or at least a franchise tag. Just one moment, please. All right. Pardon me. All right, so let's get this started. I've devised this kind of into little sections here of offensive and defensive. We're going to start talking about quarterbacks here. This quarterback market is definitely more intriguing than the last one. We're going to start off with the highest overall guy who could be hitting the market here in Baker Mayfield. This is a bit of an interesting one. These stats look nice. Baker looks like he can be an absolute solid quarterback for a team. Now, he has not been the idea of consistency on this Browns team. He's had rough games, and especially as of late, he's had more rough games than last. That could be in due to the Browns spending one of their higher draft picks on Emory Jones here, who I don't know if he's taken the field yet at all. He has put up a good passer rating on how many attempts? On 6 of 8. So Emory's showing some nice flashes early on. Still clearly developmental, but this is kind of the sign we're looking at that Baker might be on his way out with Emory Jones taking over. So Baker Mayfield's could probably be the highest overall quarterback in free agency, with Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady both receiving 2-year extensions from their respective teams. The next highest we also have is up here in Jared Goff. He's been kind of getting tossed around. He's done quite well here. He's got a solid record. It's going to be kind of up in the air whether the Broncos decide it's time to move on or not. They have some options. They do have another free agency quarterback here in Drew Lock. Not someone I would be holding out my hope for if I was looking for a quarterback in free agency. But he is worth mentioning. Still young, still has the ability to break out. Although that margin for error is incredibly smaller now. So basically the entire Broncos QB situation is something to be looked at as we get into free agency coming up. Probably the next highest guys we're looking at here is Daniel Jones. He has played respectable for this Texans team. He basically led them in rushing yards last year as well. Like he pulled a Russell Wilson in really carrying this team. So will the Texans bring him back? It's kind of hard to say. They're going to be having an early pick this year. Their record's not very strong currently, and I don't imagine it's going to change too much down the stretch. Maybe they can sneak out a few more wins. But what they're going to do with Daniel Jones is really going to set the precedent for what they spend on in free agency and what they decide they want to look at in the draft. If we see Daniel Jones hit market, that is basically just telling the entire draft, I'm picking the best quarterback I can at the spot I am, which I would imagine is going to be hopefully Bryce Young for them. Currently, I think they do hold the bottom pick, at least according to our power rankings. I don't know how, considering they do have a win, and the Bears have yet to gain one. Could be just on strength of schedule, but we'll see. So Daniel Jones is going to be an option. Another one of those kind of high overalls that borderline starter, doesn't have too much more upside. Going to be interesting to see how people treat him. We do also have, where is he? Where is it? Raiders. Sam Darnold is also going to hit in the market. His whole thing has kind of died down. Hey there, Wyatt. How you doing? Sam Darnold's thing about being a starter here has really died down. It has not been pretty here. He got his first start today since suspension, and has not performed well from what I've heard. I have not looked at the numbers though. I don't know if teams are really going to be still vying for Sam Darnold to be potentially a starter. We'll have to see how they react to him hitting free agency because I imagine he will. Um, they do have Mariota here, the Raiders, so I guess they're not going to be overly wanting a quarterback. But if I was in their shoes, I would be probably looking to draft one. I mentioned that yesterday. I think that makes the most smart decision. And the last one I'm looking for is this one, Jameis Winston. Came off a very strong season with the Saints. The Saints elected to not retain him. They were a little tight on money. So they decided to go to free agency without a quarterback and say, we'll draft one instead. So I have not looked at Jameis' stats. I do want to check those out quickly. Not on any ridiculous pace like this down here, as we can tell. But he's having a very serviceable season. So that does beg the question, do the Panthers really think, hey, we're going to be drafting probably in the middle of the pack, maybe upper middle. Do we think we can get a better quarterback prospect than what Jameis is for us right now? Or not? It's going to be a question they're going to have to debate all year. I mean, I would continue to start him. You got PJ Walker there in case, injury or whatever occurs. Or if the tank does, I guess, set in, if Jameis really just doesn't ball out. But they're going to have a lot of conversations with what to do with Jameis Winston down the stretch. And currently, he is set to be a free agent. So it'll be very interesting to see how they react to that. All right, so let's move on to running backs. This is a deep group. This is the polar opposite of what we had last year. Like complete polar opposite. We're gonna start from the top and work down. I'll switch over there. Where's the first one? The first one should be, yep, Devin Singletary. So Devin Singletary is a bit of an interesting one here. Clearly the Bills, I don't think have any desire to retain him. You picked Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams does exactly what Devin Singletary does, and you got him on a cheap contract for 3 more years after you'll have Singletary. I think Singletary is basically as good as gone here. So let's show him off. Not an overly speedy guy, definitely high agility. This is the kind of guy that makes that one cut you see in the receiving game, and then there's just nothing but green grass in front of him. So he's going to be somewhat of interest. He does have decent passing grades and stats here. I don't know how much he can really offer a team in that retrospect, but he's going to be someone that I would imagine teams will take a second look at if that running back room to them is starting to look thin, especially for third downs. All right, next up, we're going to have, where there, Browns. Kareem Hunt. This is going to be one of the big ones. Browns are going to be tight in money. I mean, letting Baker go to elect Emory Jones to start, if that is the way they go, is going to give them a lot of working room. I mean, Kareem Hunt, he's still young. He'll be hitting the market at 28, 88 overall already. Like this is a starting caliber running back, especially with how good his stats are in the receiving game. Yeah, like just look at that. This is the type of player for a lot of these heavy gun systems I'm seeing a lot of the teams use that I would fit perfectly. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts here. If you are one of those teams, you should spend the money it would take to get a Kareem Hunt. This is one of those guys you do spend that money for. So I'll be excited to see what happens to him. I don't imagine the Browns retain him with how much other positions they're going to have to spend the money on to fill out. But keep an eye on Kareem Hunt. This is one that is going to be a big, big player come free agency. Where's the next one? Next one down here. Tony Pollard. He's another very interesting player. Tony always has played well here for the Cowboys. Not a very strong player, but he puts his will into everything. Like, good kick returner. He'll give you what he's got. Solid in the receiving game. He's someone that teams should look at as kind of the way the Raiders were looking at Kenyon Drake. He's going to be a offensive weapon. You move him all around. You get him in on special teams. You'll probably really end up just loving him as a total player, but with that being said, he's going to have limits. So what you really have to ask yourself when hitting free agency is how much can I actually use a player like that? And if I can, how much am I willing to spend? Because that's what teams are going to be betting on. I mean, he's only going to be 26 hitting free agency. Going to be interesting to see how teams actually respond to that. Now, we have this major trade. So I will mention this is a trade. Saquon Barkley was moved here for a package. He has not played overly well, I believe. Looking at the numbers, like this is a pretty lackluster start for Saquon Barkley for a running back of his caliber. I mean, he's got a decent average of 4.0, but having under 300 yards and like no injury being kind of the excuse, having some kind of disgruntled emotions towards his last team, which got him sat down for a while. It's going to be hard for some teams to want to spend the money on him. I think the Dolphins are going to have an honest conversation of if paying Barkley is even worth it to them. If he really does not like pick up the pace down the stretch here, especially with them going for a playoff spot, they want to try to take it deep last year. They came just short. I think it's going to really be the difference maker on whether Barkley can get it together in this scheme or not. So, he, as one of the trade guys, do naturally expect there to be an extension. He's one of the ones though that I think he might actually hit free agency purely because of his productivity being so poor. Move on. Mike Davis is up next. One of the older running backs that I think is of note. Hint free agency. He's kind of just a do-it-all. Again, has power. Absolutely is not a liability in the receiving game. This is Mr. Reliable. If you're tight on money, you need a starting quality running back. You know you're not going to be spending the draft capital on a young guy to take that reign. Mike Davis is there for you. There's really nothing else I can say about that. Next, Kenyon Drake. Gibson has really shown that he is the 3-down back here. They did bring in Kenyon Drake to take some of those third downs, be the relief back. But Gibson has just dominated in every game I've seen him in. He has just been the absolute alpha running back here. So that really leaves Kenyon Drake kind of on the outside yet again on yet another team. So that's going to make me question on how much a team's really going to want to pay for a guy like this who is on his third team, now being on the outs yet again. gonna be something interesting to see. He's always put up like okay productivity, but at 29 years old, he's only got a few years left. How much our team's really gonna be betting on that? We're gonna have to see. Here's a big one. James Robinson. His time to get paid has come around finally. Finally, it's come around. So we're in an interesting spot here as the Jags. CJ Verdell has, I mean, just look at the numbers yourself. Like, you can't let that go, right? You just drafted him. You have Etienne here. I mean, maybe you consider moving on from Etienne as well. I actually would consider it. I mean, he's got some value. Verdell is cheaper, younger, already, or actually not younger, they're the same age, but cheaper, younger, and maybe you can get a decent haul for Etienne. So what I would actually consider here as the Jags is I'd actually give Robinson his extension and possibly looking at moving Etienne with Verdell doing a very similar role for cheaper. That's just for me though. But as James Robinson as a free agent, I mean this is a great player. This guy runs hard between the tackles. He has that kind of chip on the shoulder you look at for a power back. Even despite him not being overly large, like he will get in guys' faces. And he's not a liability in the receiving game either. He plays well. I fully expect some team to have serious interest in James Robinson coming into free agency, even though he is not the most speedy or most agile player. I think he offers a lot just on pure skill and determination as a runner. Leonard Fournette back up again for his possible fourth team. So playoff Lenny is going to be someone to be very excited to watch. Lions are making that playoff push. Swift offers everything as the third down back, your every down back. But when you want inches, you bring in Leonard Fournette just to hammer him. It's a nice combo. I'll be curious to see if the Lions really value that. They just got rid of Jamal Williams because Leonard Fournette has played better. So that is another play I was going to talk about was Jamal Williams, but he's already in free agency. So not too much to mention there. Jamal does a very similar job to what Leonard Fournette does. It's just Leonard plays a little bit better in this scheme. So it'll be interesting to see if Leonard does get picked up by yet a fourth team by the time he's 28 years old. He's still got a bit of tread on the tires, especially with how little Jacksonville kind of played him before they moved him. They were really trying to trade him hard. It's going to be interesting to see what they actually really value Leonard Fournette at. We have yet another power back hitting free agency here in Damian Harris. Damian Harris is intriguing in similar ways that James Robinson is. However, he's got a little bit more speed to him, but definitely more downhill. Sorry, just someone's knocking on the door. Uh, but when you're talking about agility as a player, I mean, not high change of direction. I don't know if you can really expect him to really make guys miss in that way. You're going to have to hope that he just gets through guys on pure contact and break tackle. So, I mean, he's played well for Bill. I don't know if he'll continue to stay here with Ramondre Stevenson and James White really kind of splitting up the duties of who's on third down and who's going to be the power back here. We're going to have to see. I think Ramondre just got... No, he did not. I thought he got a breakout, pardon me. But they also have Master T here to do that power role. I have a hard time believing Damian Harris actually stays here. So, I would fully expect him to hit free agency. He's going to be intriguing for guys who want to run downhill and literally just have him run in a straight line. But besides that, I don't know how much more he actually offers. Moving on. There's the last big one I want to talk about is Chris Carson. Kind of had a really good season here. It's been up and down. But if you look at him as an actual player, He offers a little bit more than someone like Damian Harris does. Not nearly as fast, definitely more quick and short game speed though. Despite not being a good route runner, his hands are pretty reliable. So I would fully expect teams to be intrigued on Chris Carson, especially hitting the market at 28. Has had some injury problems, so it might not be as big a contract as someone like Kareem Hunt, who's only a couple overall higher than him. I fully expect teams will be quite excited at the idea of possibly getting Chris Carson here. And last guy I need to talk about here is Alexander Madison. He's just been Mr. Reliable every time Dalvin Cook is not in. He has done all of the roles without fail every time Cook is hurt, every time Cook needs a breather. Sometimes you almost can't tell a difference, especially in real life when you see Madison take the ball. So coming in at 25, like he is still very young. Like this is an intriguing player for teams to look at and be like, hey, maybe we can get him on that, maybe a 1 year, or maybe we can get him on a couple years short deal. Teams should be very intrigued looking at what Alexander Madison has to offer them. Now we're going to start talking about wide receivers. I'm going to go through. There's a couple lower guys here, like Scotty Miller just got traded today for a third. He'll be hitting free agency probably despite that trade. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see because the Chiefs now both have Scotty Miller and Mecole Hardman, who are both hitting free agency at the same time at about the same overall. So I imagine one of those guys is a lock in hitting free agency. Antonio Brown is also someone I'll just mention quickly. Still productive, although his age is ending up there. It's more or less a when he's going to retire. He could retire at the end of the season. He could try to go one more. We're going to have to see. Anyone else of interest? Yes. So here's some guys I want to talk about a little bit more. Deebo Samuel's time to get paid has come up, and they do not have money here. The money is all-time tight, especially after giving Tim Patrick here a contract. Nelson Aguilar, that'll help free up some, but getting Deebo back here should be a priority for how well he plays here at San Fran. But as of current time, he is looking to be a free agent, and teams that run that Shanahan system that get these guys open in space and let them make a lot of the yards after the catch should be very excited at the idea that Deebo Samuel might hit free agency. Let's take a look at the other teams. We also have Jacoby Myers, who's hidden. I won't mention him too much. Jameson Crowder, yet another guy who's good in the slot. There's a lot of these kind of slot guys hidden. Hunter Renfrow being the most important of them all. I do not remember if Hunter Renfrow is still on. No, he's not. Oh gosh, where did he go? Is he in the Bills? I'm trying to remember all these trades all at once without looking. Yes, he is. So this is possibly the best slot guy you're looking at coming in here at Hunter Renfrow. I mean, he's just a very gritty, nose to grindstone type of player. He gets in between, the linebackers. He understands leveling very well. He makes the catches. He plays special teams. Some teams going to value that highly and pay him the money he deserves. But that's about at the absolute peak of what you can see for slot receivers hitting free agency here. We have Robbie Anderson, who's potentially hitting again. Brandon Cooks is potentially hitting again. I don't know how much teams are going to value him. He's clearly still a good player. But with that being said, he's been moved around a lot. He's kind of more of that plug-and-play guy at this point. And we have two more guys that I need to talk about here. Let's get down to... There they are. Alright, so let's yet again talk about Davante Adams. How the Packers are going to try to retain him, if they can, is going to be beyond me. They're going to have to do some cap gymnastics to make sure that happens. And they should. Having him with Mechie on as the number 2, and then Amari Rodgers, who's breaking out this year as the slot, is very exciting for them. Very exciting. They just traded for Joe Reed. They got Taylor and Cooks backing them up. I mean, getting Adams here is just like the last piece of the puzzle. But there is a chance they say, hey, you know what? Let's run with the young guys. Let's have Mechie now be that number one spot. We'll let Adams hit. Which, if that does happen, all teams, like there's very few teams that should just pass on that idea. Everyone should at least look at him, and about probably 24 to 26 teams should be bidding on him. This is the kind of guy you don't want to ever see hit free agency if you own him, and every kind of guy you want to hit free agency if you don't. I'll be interested to see what happens. Another guy like that, to a little bit of a lesser extent, is DJ Moore. He was up for trade early on in the season. Teams did pass on that, probably not wanting to pay what the actual price would be to get a guy like Moore. Terrace Marshall has broken out here. Dante Demas was a first-round pick, and I heard he's starting to get some good reps going. So Moore is kind of like the age-old regime guy who's going to be getting moved out. So teams that really need that number one are going to be quite excited to see that Moore hits free agency. We're going to be seeing a lot of money be thrown at these receivers if they hit. So I don't have too much more to say anymore. He's really a complete package. Like, you can't ask for more or less than a guy like DJ Moore. He just is great all around. I mean, you could get him on special teams even if you wanted. I think that would be a mistake of his talent, but there's nothing that you could ask of DJ Moore that he could not do for you. Tight ends. Let's start talking about these. This market is horrendous. There was some intriguing prospects early, and then they started getting the extensions. There's Zach Ertz, who he's still playing well at 31 years old. He's probably going to regress in free agency, but he might have some role somewhere as a receiving tight end. Someone to take note of. There's Dan Arnold, who's a very similar player in that retrospect, who's a little lower overall. Foster Moreau, Drew Sample, more a prototypical tight end, kind of in the middle of half receiver, half good blocker. The only guy really of note that hasn't got an extension is OJ Howard. And that's about it. OJ Howard has gotten moved from multiple teams. But, I mean, he still clearly has good ability. Like, that's not, I think, up for debate. He's still a great athlete, someone who's going to be a mismatch. It's going to be hard to see teams probably, like, think maybe it's really not the time for OJ Howard to get that big contract extension yet again. Maybe it is worth just a 1 year. Teams are going to have to make that choice when hitting free agency because he hasn't shown much as a player. He has gotten good situations, playing on the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. He's played with the Niners, who have quite used their tight ends well over the last few years. But he hasn't produced. He just straight up hasn't produced. I'll be curious to see. You could argue that he's been buried behind better tight ends in Travis Kelce and George Kittle. I don't know how much I buy into that. I'll be curious to see if he actually gets paid big or if it's another 1 year. But that's your best tight end option, hitting free agency. Interior offensive line. We have some older guys hitting in Ben Jones, Matt Paradis, kind of some solid fill-in options. I won't show you too much of them. Mitch Morse in that role as well. Dalton Rinser, kind of a lower end guard who was of some intrigue, got traded today. So won't talk too much about him. Probably going to get an extension from the Colts. We'll talk quickly on a guy that did also get traded. There. And Joel Bitonio got traded today, or not today, I think was it 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago. He hasn't got an extension yet. Again, I just talked about how the Niners have very little wiggle room in their money situation. especially after spending a high second on Aaron Banks. I mean, it could be another 1 year push thing for the Niners spending that trade capital. We're gonna have to see though. He is slated to hit free agency. He'll be very desirable by basically every team. I don't know how much we're gonna see here. I mean, if I look at the Niners as a team, Mike McGlinchey is another guy I'm gonna talk about in a little bit. Like their cap situation is gonna be tight all the way around. Another team I do need to talk about, or a guy who's on the trade block right now, is Jason Kelsey. If he stays another year, he's definitely the more valuable of the older centers that is going to be on the market. I don't know how much teams are going to value him. I doubt he gets more than a 2 year kind of deal. It's it's just going to be something that I'm going to monitor. I'm going to see if a team even wants to trade for him. I think the current going rate is a third. Sorry, just responding to a message. But for older centers, Jason Kelsey is absolutely going to be at the top here. We have some other guys in. Where is he? Oh, whoops, I went too far. We have Brandon Linder, who's also starting to get to that older age, who could be hitting free agency. I'd be quite excited, as most teams, seeing that good a center who's been that consistent on a bad Jags O line. I would be quite excited to see that. So teams should be looking at him. Rodney Hudson is also in that same category. Teams should be quite excited to see Rodney Hudson hit free agency as an older center. We're going to see a lot of center guys, I think, get paid. I think the center market for the draft, I mean, it wasn't high already. I guess that's another tidbit I'll say from looking at them. The center market was pretty bad in the draft. So seeing the free agency center market be so strong, that's something that I think teams are going to be very high on spending the money it takes. Another guy I can also mention is Ryan Jensen, also is potentially hitting. That's yet another older, reliable center. Just these guys are, you can almost pick them everywhere here with how this draft is going. Uh, Now for guards, this market's a lot thinner. Uh, David DeCastro still could be hitting. He's a guy on my team. Eric Flowers is another guy who plays guard. Kind of plug and play guys. They play well when you plug them in, but they're gonna get beat. The most interesting one, who has yet to get paid, is Dalton Edwards. So Dalton Edwards has developed nicely here, and he has become just a very good space blocker here. I think a lot of teams that run this zone stretch scheme are going to be very, very happy to see David Edwards potentially hit free agency, especially the fact that he can only get better as time is going on. Not the most insane athlete, but he does play well within the confines that the Rams have put him in. I'd expect teams to pay the big money. If we saw Connor Williams get paid big, expect David Edwards to get paid big. Now, we're going to be moving to tackles. This is the complete opposite of what the interior offensive line is. The interior offensive line is stacked. You basically should ignore it if you're looking at prospects in the draft. Basically, ignore it. The free agency is so good. I don't see how you could even look at it anywhere else, any other way. Tackles, however, definitely look at in the draft. You should be looking to draft all the tackles possible because this free agency tackles are rough. Like we're talking Andre Dillard and Jawan Taylor are third and fourth highest on this list. Like that's how thin we are here at guys who are up for free agency. They could break out with you. They're also a bit younger, but I mean, the odds are not in your favor. The most highest guys we could talk about would be for Seattle Seahawks, Dwayne Brown. I mean, 37 years old, looking at hitting the market again. This is another one way up in the air. He could retire. He could re-sign with Seattle and go yet again. I mean, it's all over the frickin' place, honestly. So, for him being the number two guy to talk about at tackle, and he's that old with that much question marks around him. It's not a good market. The best guy here is the guy I showed earlier in Mike McGlinchey. And even then, Mike does not come without his downfalls. He is a really poor pass protector. I mean, you can see the rating here. For a top tackle who's going to earn top tackle money, to have him be that bad at pass protecting that you could get, a tackle in the draft who could potentially be a better pass blocker. If you value that more, I mean, Mike's not going to be your guy. Especially having that undisciplined penalty tendency. A guy who could really just pull penalties all the time when you least need them. Teams are going to be hard-assed to pay Mike McGlinchey that money, but he is so far above talent-wise than everyone else, he's going to naturally get it. Like, we're talking, if you remove Dwayne Brown, the next highest guy is Jawan Taylor, 72 overall is what I have currently listed as. So we're dropping in a minus 11 to get to the next guy, who could be a long-term option. And that's not desirable as teams if you're looking in free agency. So my recommendation, especially from what I've seen of the tackles in this class, spend the time you need to scout these tackles and draft them early. Like, please, for your team building, draft them early because this is going to be a rough market for tackles. And with that, we're going to be ending off the offensive free agents and we're going to be moving on to defense. Let's start, you know what, because the safety class is so poor, we're going to start with the safety free agents because this class of safety free agents is going to be the lifesaver here. Let's go all the way to the top. We'll start with Kareem Jackson. Kareem Jackson, he's getting old. Honestly, at this point as a safety, you're going to want to probably use him more as a slot guy than anything. We have another guy who's very like that later on in this list we'll talk about. But his physical ability is still going to decline as he goes on. His mental processing is still high. So I think putting him in the slot, you'll get good productivity out of him. He should be valued. He was not valued at all last year, which is going to be interesting to see how he goes in this time. I think the difference between last free agency and this one, though, is last year's safety class was incredible. I mean, for me to get Harville Peel in the 6th and him to be like a 68 overall already is incredible. That is not going to be the case with this safety class. This safety class is about as bad as I think you can possibly go. They are not good athletes, or they play the pass horribly, or they just get bodied in the run. Like, I have spent the time needed to scout all those safeties, and I have been drastically underwhelmed. So, another tidbit, please spend your money on the safeties in free agency instead of drafting them, because holding out for that top safety in the draft is not going to go well for you. You're going to get burnt quite poorly. So Kareem Jackson's kind of the first guy here if you're looking at someone to come down, play slot a lot as your safety here. Next guy. This guy should be of great interest. He was signed on a bargain by the Bengals, and now he's going to hit the market again at 28, a good age, after establishing himself as, yeah, I'm that big guy who can make the hits, come down, play the cover in the back. Von Bell. Von Bell has played very well for this Bengals team. I imagine they're going to want to retain him. I don't know what they're thinking money-wise. Their cap space is a little tight this year. They do have some younger guys here that can do some more rangy roles. I mean, Josh Jones absolutely can do Von Bell's role if needed. It's going to be interesting to see. I think a lot of teams who like to have that box safety should be really looking at Von Bell coming up here. I think he'll play very well. Another guy immediately we need to talk about is Jordan Poyer with Bubba Bolden already overtaking him. There's that Bubba Bolden pick coming out to really help the Bills. Jordan Poyer, another guy you can kind of drop up and down in coverage depending on where you need him. Another older guy, but definitely serviceable. Don't really have too much to say. He is on the trade block currently. I don't see too many teams having that interest in him. He's a little expensive as currently stated. We'll see though. He's someone who could be of interest for a lot of teams. As for next, we're going to have to go down a little, and we're going to talk about my boy, Devin McCourty, who's starting at free safety for me. Again, older guy. I can't really say definitively whether he's going to retire or not. He's playing well. He's had some missteps in deep coverage, but he's a dominant free safety still. Now, he could opt to retire at the top of his game. He could not. He's going to regress a little just purely on how age works. He'll be of interest for some teams, and I think they should absolutely look at him. Chiefs. Chiefs have Juan Thornhill currently hitting. I don't quite know what the idea is here. They do have Eric Rowe. I mean, the idea is they could extend Juan, have him move to strong safety. Rowe plays that kind of hybrid safety, play in the slot role. So I don't know if Juan's going to hit. If he does, he's intriguing. He's not getting nearly as much play time as he probably should with Quandre Diggs here. I mean, definitely the morality cutting down hurts. He's someone teams should look at for possibly a 1 year, kind of a prove it deal, but we'll see how teams react to this safety market. It's pretty strong. Another guy to talk about, Kari Willis, another box safety who can run downhill like really quickly, hit the guy hard, really make these guys earn their yardage in the run game. Again, guys who love those type of players should be ecstatic to see how many there is here. If you don't have them, this is where you get them. Moving on, we have Donovan Wilson, who's played quite well here. This guy can play a little more hybrid role. I want to talk about him a little more because he's probably a little more valuable. Good speed, great excel, hard hitter. Like there's nothing this guy can't really do. You can kind of plug and play him into any role. I think he'll be valued by a lot of teams, especially if Dallas can't retain him. We do know their cap situation is gonna continue to get worse. It's only ever gonna continue to get worse. We're gonna have to see how they respond to it. Getting Anthony Brown off books next year is gonna help them dramatically. We'll see how they respond. Jimmy Ward was cut. He was on the Niners. I think he is on another team currently. I can't remember who. I want to say Patriots. He's someone to be of note. Another older free safety. Same thing with Adrian Amos. I think he's on the Lions. Is who paid for him? Yes. Lions. Adrian Amos. This is going to be more of an interesting guy. He's just hitting 30 now and going to hit the market again as one of the top safeties. Also plays that hybrid role very well. He was slowing down a little, which I think is why Green Bay decided to move on and draft a safety to replace him, especially with that cap situation getting tight. But he's still, I mean, look at him. He's still a top safety. Even with regression going to start hitting him in the next couple years, I mean, this is a top safety, all in all. You can't really complain if that's who you're ending up with. Another kind of box guy who has developed well in zone is Taylor Rapp. Taylor Rapp has slowly become a good player in this league. Just very steady, plays the box well. He can drop into single high, although I would not recommend he does it often. He does have the zone coverage to play that. I think he's a very intriguing player, and teams, especially with how young he is, should be looking at bringing him in. And the last guy I want to talk about is C.J. Gardner-Johnson. He's not really a safety. I know he's listed as run support. He's really not. He's a slot guy, very much like Kareem Jackson. So he's going to have a certain role on these teams. I think that role is still valuable. I think he still should get paid quite well. But we'll see how teams respond to him. I imagine Malcolm Jenkins probably also either retires or hits free agency with a cut, with the Saints needing to gain as much money as possible. But CJ Gardner-Johnson, he'll have a role. Teams will be excited with him in some way. Let's start talking about corners. All right, so this is corner plethora here. There's so many good ones. Again, if you're thinking of drafting a corner early, I don't know if I could, within my right mind, recommend you do. There is so many. Trey Waynes, he's getting older, but he's still a good athlete. He still covers well. I mean, Bengals have no need for him. They've more than over prepared to have him leave. He's just the first guy of many to be of interest. Broncos, you need one of the top slots in the game. Well, Bryce Callahan is hitting free agency. I can almost guarantee that from talking to the user. So, you need a top slot. Callahan's gonna be hitting there. Nothing more I could say about that. Even with Callahan's older age, he's still gonna be a dominant slot. We still have Steven Nelson who's going to be hitting. He's kind of got pushed out here after getting paid big. Greg Newsome and Ward have taken the dominant outside role. Nelson probably has played mostly the slot here, but he can play both. Teams should be excited to have such a versatile corner hit free agency. Murphy Bunting. This is someone after Jamel Dean, who was traded, I imagine gets an extension, but he is slated to go. Murphy Bunting, again, with how tight this cap space is for the Bucks, teams should be preparing to spend the money required to get Murphy Bunting. He has a very certain skill set, has played a lot in the slot here for the Bucks. He could, in theory, play outside though, and I think that's a very reasonable thing for teams to then spend the money on doing. I'll be curious to see how teams respond to him with some of the other guys I'm going to list here as we go down. Uh, all right, and going down to the Cardinals, Byron Murphy Jr. This is another top corner. The Cardinals haven't spent the money to extend him. I mean, Emerson's playing that number 2 role currently. I imagine Verrett leaves after this. Maybe he takes it 1 year to come back and play that kind of third outside corner role. I imagine Byron Murphy gets an extension here. However, he's currently slated not to. And because he's not to, a lot of these man-heavy teams should be quite intrigued to see that he is there and available. He plays tight man. He started his career playing in the slot, but he's developed as an outside corner here with Pat Pete gone over the last couple of years. I think teams will be excited to see him there. Rashad Fenton, another guy who's been stuck in the slot, who has played outside occasionally and has played well. Young guy, decent overall, can't complain about him at all. I think teams who are very tight on cap will be excited to see that he's going to be near the lower end of the market here. Colts, they just got Dean. They also have Roby. I imagine Roby's gone after this year. They got a lot of these corners who are going to be gone. Moore still playing the slot. They imagine they extend Dean long term. It's going to be interesting to see what people value Roby at. He is slowing down, but he had a revitalized career with the Saints. He's played decently well here. We're going to have to see what teams really think they should do. Time to move forward. Where is he? Kyle Fuller is here with his brother, Kendall. And he's just honestly a plug and play corner at this spot in his career. I don't think he offers you much high upside, but if you are really hurting at corner, you're trying to make the push, spend the money required, I think he'll play serviceable for you. Same thing with Darius Williams here. He lacks height, but he plays with a lot of heart, and he plays with very good mental skill. Teams will be interested in him not only just playing outside, but in the slot. I think he offers a lot for these heavy zone teams as well. He should be of immediate interest. Same thing with Emmanuel Mosley, who also is hitting free agency. Just tons of good skill here. Just a plethora of corners, and we're not even at the best ones yet. Let's start talking about Bradbury. Just wow. The fact that he could potentially hit the market is very exciting. The Giants have done a lot more of this hybrid look, which much more suits some of the other guys they have on this roster. Bradbury has played well here, probably would continue to play well if they gave him the money. I think teams will be quite excited to see him hit. I know definitely these heavy zone teams, these quarters teams, should be very intrigued. Let's move on to Panthers. Stephon Gilmore. I mean, the Panthers just have a plethora of corners. As much as Gilmore is awesome, they they, they have more corners than they know what to do with that are quality players. So having Stephon hit, having that top corner, even at 32 hit, like he'll be a top corner for still years to come. I mean, teams are going to be hard pressed to say no when they see Gilmore in free agency. Can't say much more about the previous defensive player of the year. Trayvon Mullen and Casey Hayward are both looking at hitting free agency here. You know, we're going to have a solid veteran with a guy who has been an up and comer here. He has played well. He has done what has been necessary as a player on the Raiders team. I mean, he plays undisciplined. That was going to be a knock for some teams. But with that being said, I mean, with the price you might be able to get him at, considering how deep this corner class is, he's going to be of value to teams. And I think that's very well found. Last guy I really want to talk about here. Where is he gone? There he is down here. Is Marcus Peters. Texans, I mentioned yesterday when I was going through their draft, the mock, have to really start either like paying these skill positions or start drafting them high. Well, they got Marcus Peters here through some trades, and I would recommend highly that they retain him. However, if they decide to go the young route and let Peters hit, teams that really rely on those heavy turnovers, like just, they'll give up a bunch of yardage, but they'll let the teams bait to get picks. Marcus Peters being available is going to be very, very nice for them. I see no reason why a team wouldn't give Peters starting caliber corner money, even at 30 years old. He's still playing well. And that's the end of the cornerbacks. Overall consensus is it's hella deep. Spend the money because you're probably going to be able to get some guys under value. Linebacker is next. We're going to have the Bills. Tremaine Edmonds. He's developed here, but he's kind of plateaued. He could be extended. Bills have to make some decisions money-wise on what they want to do. Teams are going to have to start figuring out whether they want to pay Tremaine Edmonds the money with him clearly still needing time to develop, or if they're just going to find their own way in the draft. The draft linebackers are looking a little sketchy as well, so we'll see what teams decide to do. Next guy, we got Drew Tranquill on my team. Drew, he had a rough start in the Super Bowl and had a rough start to the season. He has come alive since then. He's played well. Teams are going to be looking for this kind of guy. Decent speed, plays the run well. No real knocks to his game other than the pass coverage. Maybe not as agile as you want to be in some of these modern schemes. He'll have value. Another guy who's a bit more opposite. Oh, who actually just got paid. I didn't even see that. All right, so Jermaine Pratt got paid. I was going to talk about him. Never mind. Erase that from your mind. I need to go down to the football team now. Let's talk about Cole Holcomb. Talk about just a glue guy. This is the guy who can play any role in the linebacker role. He is not a liability. He plays the pass well. He plays the run well. He's just going to be a solid guy. Don't know if he'll ever be an All-Pro. Don't think he'll ever be a Hall of Famer. But he'll keep the team together and he'll keep you moving. Can't complain about guys like that. Another guy that should be of interest, who's a little more high athlete, is Greenlaw here, especially with this Niners team. Again, getting so high up there in cap. They're going to have to start making these moves where they let these guys go. Greenlaw is much more that high athlete who plays well in the pass game. Teams should be spending the money on Dre Greenlaw hitting. And a guy who's complete opposite of that is Blake Martinez. Has gotten better in the passing game. Definitely probably a little bit of an overpay by the Giants when they did pay him. Much more of a guy that plays the run. Solid tackler, will keep the downs and distance short. With that being said, I don't think he offers you much more than that, especially hitting the market at 29. I think teams that struggle against the run should look at getting him a decent contract, but I don't think it'll be nearly as high as what he got this time around. A guy who plays the pass well, Blake Cashman, yet another guy that these guys, if you need a pass cover linebacker, pay Blake Cashman, take him off on run down so he doesn't get hurt. But when you need that third, it's 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, you need a pass cover linebacker, bring him in, he'll play well. I think you can't really go wrong in that retrospect. Panthers, Alexander Johnson. He drops back pretty well for a guy his size. Quite a large player, but he gets back in coverage. I think he'll be of interest to some hybrid teams as well. Maybe the Patriots, maybe the Giants with losing Blake Martinez. But he's currently slated to hit free agency, and I think he'll be definitely of interest. A guy who's kind of getting older, but plays well. Another good glue guy in Nick Kwiatkowski. Can't really complain about his being here if you are looking for a linebacker. He's another plug and play guy. I don't think he's a long term option for most of these teams. But him and Corey Littleton, they have certain roles that they can offer, just not nearly as much as what they were paid for originally. And the last kind of big guy to talk about is Bobby Wagner. His age is up there, right? We all knew at some point that he is going to be going, but he'll still be a high overall for most of these teams, and he'll offer a lot. He is currently on the trade block. I don't know if he's going to get moved before the trade deadline. I'd imagine not at this point. But teams who are in a very short attacking window, who need that middle linebacker with all that experience, Bobby Wagner is an exceptional player that you can get this free agency. You missed so much, Jersey Wayne? I know. I'm starting to kind of speed it up here a little, trying to get to the end. But you'll be able to watch this back on Twitch, and I'll be uploading it to YouTube as well. Alright, let's now move to edge players. The first guy I want to talk about, Von Miller. He stated to hit free agency, especially with Chandler Jones getting paid. The Cardinals have other issues that they're going to want to start getting paid here. I'd say it's a high likelihood Von Miller hits. And he, for 3-4 and 4-3 teams, is going to be an absolute demon. He's going to be an absolute demon. So I think teams will be very excited to pay Von Miller the money he probably deserves, even at an older age. I imagine. I mean, I can't remember what the contract restriction is going to be, but I still imagine 16 mil per year is in the books here for Von Miller. Another guy who plays for me, who's slated to hit, is Za'Darius Smith. He's been out with injury for a little while. So he had a decent start in his first game, but past that point, it's been a little rough. We're going to have to see how he bounces back from injury this week in the game I play later today. But he is slated to hit free agency. I mean, there's no real push for me to sign him back, especially with Ali Gay playing well and Uchenna Nwosu. So Za'Darius Smith might be hitting free agency. That's going to interest a lot of teams who want that big body guy who can play 3-4 or 4-3. Now we're talking about a more hybrid guy in Van Ginkel. Technically an edge, but he drops in and out of coverage consistently. He's all over the board. This is, I mean, if you're just a hybrid guy, this is who you pick. If you're not a hybrid, I see no reason. He'll get paid a lot for the very specific role he does, but he has very few options in teams that will probably pay the money to go to. So I'll be curious to see what Van Ginkel's actual market is. I don't really have an estimate as to what it'll be, but he'll have a decent market. D Ford is also up here. He plays decently well, but he's getting up there in age. He's had a lot of injuries up to this point in his career where he's been in and out of the line. I mean, the Niners are absolutely going to let him go to try to use that money to keep some of the other guys I mentioned previously or to extend some guys. It's just kind of time for Ford to go. So teams who just need kind of a fill-in rotational rusher, Ford's a very exciting player. We got another guy hitting here in Josh Allen. Plays the hybrid well. Could probably play 4-3. Uh, Literally just a clean player all around. Just clean. Oh, he's actually injured right now. That sucks. But definitely needs some help in the run game. But as a pass rusher, he is just aggressive. He just manhandles these tackles so well. Even when I was playing him, Slater was having an up and down day versus him. So Josh Allen for a lot of these 3-4, 4-3, even the hybrid teams are going to be quite excited to see Josh Allen in free agency. A guy who was bid on, where is he? There he is. Trey Flowers. He was bid on by the Patriots. He's just a good role player at this point in his career. I imagine after this year he'll probably be almost a permanent 4-3 edge. His athletic ability, it wasn't very high to begin with, but it's just gotten lower as he's aged. Still solid player, but he'll have a very limited market. Same thing with Chase Winovich here, but kind of the opposite reason. He plays very well in a 3-4. I don't see him going play a 4-3 very well. They'll have certain teams that will be more interested in them than others. But again, a very, like, if you can tell already, this is a pretty strong edge class as well. We have Raiders, Yannick Ngakoue, and Cleveland Farrell. Uh, I mean, what's more to say other than they've played well here? They'll probably continue to play well here if they were extended. Farrell, I imagine, would probably play better in a 4-3. Ngakoue can kind of play both pretty reliably. Uh, so teams will be definitely hunting on these guys if they aren't traded or extended. I imagine teams will be spending the big money for guys who are still fairly young here. And the last young guy I want to talk about who has played well last year, leading in tackles for loss and sacks, I believe. Marcus Davenport is going to hit the market at 26 years old. Freaky athlete, good length, solid power. This is a very good edge rusher, just all in all. Just complete player. I mean, you can see the stats for yourself. Just an absolute complete player. Teams are probably, this is one of the guys that's going to get the big money. I would not be surprised if we see 20 million hit when people are trying to pay for this guy. He absolutely has the ceiling of being a top edge rusher. He just basically you just give it time. He's hitting his prime. He's hitting the stride right now. If I was a guy who was looking for edge, throw the 20 million, walk away happy. That's basically my thoughts on that. And IDL, let's finish it up. Akeem Hicks, always solid, just an absolute veteran presence. Plays the run well, gets good pressure, pushed in the pocket. You're gonna be happy with him. Another guy who's getting older here, that plays the interior well. J.J. Watt slated to hit. I imagine they let him go to retain some of the younger guys they have, but he'll be exciting to see. I'll be curious to see what role some teams use him in. I think I'd actually like to see him in a hybrid system where he gets to be that kind of big body DN that rotates in and out of the inside. I think it'll be interesting. But I don't know what kind of money you'll expect J.J. Watt to get. I actually think you'll get a 1 year, is what I expect if he doesn't retire. Next, I need to go to the Washington football team, who has retained Matthew Ioannidis. They moved Payne to me. They extended Tim Settle. They already had Allen on the extension. It's going to be curious to see if they decide to keep Ioannidis. He doesn't defend the run overly well. What he does offer you, though, is interior pass rush very reliably. He gets home, especially in those one-on-one situations, very well. Teams are going to value that getting that rush D tackle. It's just how much are you going to value it? That's really the question here. A quick guy I'll mention is Malcolm Brown and Sheldon Rankins. Very solid guys on the interior that offer some work. Kingsley Keke has played quite well for the Packers. He does pass rush pretty well. Solid run defender. Probably fits that 3-4 D end role well. I don't know how much I'd actually put him in a 4-3. Devon Godchaux down to the Patriots here. He's just been overtaken by Barmore. There's no need for them to retain him. He's going to hit. But there's a lot of, there's a big group of those guys there. that are just solid players that play in the middle. If you're looking at D tackles, there's a whole slew of them. I would probably recommend paying the money for those guys so you don't have to worry about the draft. You wouldn't be as bad in some other situations with some other corner groups here. If you ended up deciding I'm going to draft an interior guy instead of actually pay one, but it's always nice to pay what you know instead of draft some unknown. Just something to consider for some teams. If you have most of your team figured out, though, then just go for the draft. I mean, always go for high upside. Seahawks, Puna Ford is hitting. Some teams will have interest in him. He's got a very distinct skill set, especially with how short he is. He is not a tall player. I'll zoom in so you can see. Very stout, will have a certain role, but I don't know how much you would really expect out of him if you're thinking pass rush wise. He plays with power, but again, his height is a limiter in what he can actually offer you. I'll be curious to see what his market actually is going to be. I think he'll offer some things to some teams, but it'll be in a very certain role. A big guy to play nose, Brandon Williams. He's getting older, but he still plays that nose tackle role well. Sheds the center, stuffs runs, fills gaps. Just, again, another one of those guys in that rotation of absolute dominant nose tackles that'll probably be good till they're about 35 and then retire happy. Last guy that kind of fits that, but is much younger, is Dalvin Tomlinson, who has not been paid yet. He got a nice contract, at least nice for the Vikings, where they didn't have to pay him a whole hell of a lot to get decent production. But now that he's hitting at 28 or 29, I mean, this is a nice thing for teams. Get him in at nose, match him up against those smaller centers, and he will just toss them aside. It'll be a severe mismatch on the interior, especially with him having that bull rush tendency. He's a disciplined player coming from Joe Judge and then playing for Mike Zimmer. Teams will be excited to see that he hits free agency, and I imagine he will. Vikings have other issues that they want to probably pay first or have the ability to pay instead of worrying about Dalvin Tomlinson. So as of current standing, what we're currently looking at as a whole is this is a great safety and cornerback and edge group with probably decent interior and a decent linebacker group. Like if you were thinking I need a defensive player to help turn my team around or to fill holes hitting this free agency, the free agents that are actually available are great. Like, do not worry about drafting these positions. You're going to have a lot available to you to spend the money on instead of draft. Now, as for offensive players, it's a bit of a different story. There's some decent starter guys who could break out at the quarterback position, but when we're talking that Drew Lock and Sam Darnold are some of the guys you need to think of when talking quarterback free agency, it shows you how shallow it's going to be. You really have Daniel Jones. Jared Goff has been moved to a couple different teams now. And then Baker Mayfield is really the prize here for quarterbacks that is still remaining. Running backs, this is a deep group. Like, do not think about drafting running backs. You have a plethora of solid talent here who can just all from like every down backs to extremely good at their roles. Like I basically put the cutoff at 70 overall when I was looking at this running back group because it is so deep. Do not worry about running back in the draft. Receiver, it's a little more thin. There's a lot of guys who play the slot very well. Your top guys of interest are going to be maybe Brandon Cooks. Hunter Renfrow is the top slot guy. I imagine Antonio Brown retires. But getting Debo, Devontae Adams, or DJ Moore from most of these teams, those three alone are going to be what's exciting hitting free agency. Tight end, this is a shit tight end free agency. If you want tight end, go draft one. The draft looks nice for tight ends. I recommend just go and pick the good ones early. Just go and do it. save yourself the hassle because this is not a good market for tight ends. Reverse for that, for interior offensive line, do not worry about drafting them early because this is just, it's not even just stacked talent, it's stacked veteran talent. These guys already have the high awareness, the play rec. They're just honestly plug and play at this point. You don't have to worry nearly as much about development. This I think is going to be something you really should spend your money on instead of worrying about drafting them early. Especially after watching that mock with how many interior guys they had go early, you really don't need to do that. The free agency is good enough. And as I stated earlier, you need to talk about reverse for the tackles. This tackle class is bad. This is not good. But the top guy being Mike McGlinchey, and he's not very great in the pass game. Like no 80s across the board even. The money he is going to receive in free agency is not going to make it worthwhile for you to be bidding or get into a high bidding war past the top money he's already going to receive. Look to the drafted tackle. There looks like there's a decent amount of good tackles, especially early on there. Highly recommend you go pick them early. So, avoid safety in the draft. Draft tackle and draft tight end high if they are of need to you. And look at quarterback high if you need it because it's a deep quarterback class and this quarterback free agency is up and down. Defensively, tons of options for you. Offensively, there's options for you if you're looking at running back and interior line. And that, I think, will cover the entirety of what our free agency is supposed to look like as of current moment. We'll see if that actually upholds as the year goes on. Today is the last day that teams are going to be trading. But that's going to cover our entire upcoming free agency as of this moment. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope to see you guys later today when I do my match. Have a good day.